Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome back to another video. Man, did we not see this coming as the news has broke that Bichette is on his way to New York as he will be playing for the Mets, and Kyle Tucker is on his way to LA to play with the Dodgers. Now, this raises a lot of questions, of course, for our team of what are we going to do now for our outfield? It was kind of the understanding that maybe Kyle Tucker was going to go to the Blue Jays, and if not, then Bo Bichette maybe would have stayed with the Blue Jays. But neither of these things have happened. So it maybe seems that there might be one other player that could end up, in Toronto, but it might be a stretch. So Brandon, let's get your thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, I think, at various points over the winter, it seemed like the Blue Jays were the favorites for both Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker. Bo Bichette, it seemed like right after the World Series, it almost felt like a foregone conclusion that he was coming back. Obviously, had that heroic Game 7 home run that very nearly became historic. He's obviously been a long time Blue Jay. It felt pretty much like a given that he'd be back early on in November. Obviously, then the offseason dragged out. Now he's with the Mets, who had to pivot to Bo Bichette because they, as did the Blue Jays, lose Kyle Tucker to the Dodgers, who, let me just say as an aside, gave Kyle Tucker way too much money. That is a exorbitant amount of dollars for one player. If you do the luxury tax calculations on their payroll, they will be basically spending $120 million on Kyle Tucker in 2026, which is just absurd. And you can't really fault the Blue Jays for not spending that kind of money. So, I think, the big name that's being rumored and thrown around right now is Cody Bellinger. He's obviously a similar player to Kyle Tucker in that he's a good outfield defender. He's actually a little bit more versatile in the outfield since he can play center field, and he's a left-handed power bat. So, I mean, in terms of that sense, he fits the Blue Jays really well because, again, we know that they've been looking for another middle of the order left-handed bat this offseason. With Tucker gone, obviously Bellinger's really the last guy available that fits that profile. But I'll be honest, I don't think Bellinger is the right fit for them. They've only loosely been connected to him, more so tangentially than anything. And again, it seems like the Yankees at this point, who are so desperate to do anything of note this offseason, are probably going to be forced to spend exorbitant amounts of money on him. So, I'd say right now, I don't really know where the Blue Jays turn. Again, it won't be a player of Bichette or Tucker's caliber, of course, because there's only so many of those players out there. But I will say that it's, and we could talk about this in a moment, but it's a credit to the Blue Jays front office that they were so active early in the offseason and bringing in guys like Dylan Cease and Kazuma Okamoto to ensure that even if this sort of doomsday scenario happened, they've still upgraded the roster effectively this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to kind of bounce off that a little bit and say that it's not impossible that Cody Bellinger does not end up on the Toronto Blue Jays in 2026. Because again, in years past, we haven't spent this kind of money. And seeing that we have acquired Dylan Cease, Kazuma Okamoto, Cody Ponce, in these, lesser deals, and we've acquired a few, minor league free agents as well. We're looking to spend money at this point. Now, are we going to spend Cody Bellinger money? It's a little bit up in the air in this point, but nothing isn't, as we have learned at this point after looking at a deal that, Kyle Tucker has gone. There is no, all bets are off at this point in the
Yeah.
MLB for the 2026 season. So who knows at this point? I will also raise the fact that if we do not get Cody Bellinger, it's most likely, and we've discussed in a similar video before Kyle Tucker was signed to the Dodgers, that if Kyle Tucker was going to end up on the Toronto Blue Jays, that Anthony Santander was probably going to get benched. Now that Tucker is signed, Santander is probably going to get the call up again, and it's probably going to end up in the outfield if Bellinger doesn't end up on the Blue Jays. Which, look, he didn't have the most amazing season in 2025, but as a longtime Orioles fan, I will say that Santander is a pretty great player overall. He's a power hitting threat. He's okay in the outfield, but overall, he was a pretty good pickup, I would say, for the Blue Jays. And if he could really find his groove with the team, I think that he would be a pretty good fill in now that we have an open slot again in the outfield.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great point. Anthony Santander, excuse me, was the big signing last offseason, right? I mean, that was a big deal that the Blue Jays got him. There was all these misses in free agency, over the years, and Santander was really the marquee guy. Yes, he's not a great defensive outfielder, and obviously he's not the best base runner either. But it's worth pointing out that prior to 2025 where he did struggle, but he was also dealing with a bunch of injuries. He had off-season hand surgery, which John Schneider did say, was partly responsible for his struggles at the plate. Hopefully that's true, and hopefully he's back to being healthy in 2026. But before that, with the Orioles, he was great from 2022 to 2024. He averaged more than 30 homers a year and over a 120 WRC plus. That's a really valuable hitter to have. I mean, easily worth the contract that he signed. And he's only 31. It's not like that's an ancient player, especially in modern sports by any means. So if he's healthy, and again, he's a switch hitter as well. So I mean, he can provide some of that power at least from the left-hand side. There at least has to be hope, I think, for internal improvements for him. Is he going to replace Bo Bichette's production? Absolutely not. Is he going to do what Kyle Tucker will probably do in Los Angeles? Again, probably not. But that's still a valuable guy to have in the middle of your order. And again, because the Blue Jays already have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., George Springer, Alejandro Kirk, I mean, there's already a lot of talent up and down this lineup. If Santander turns it around and plays like he did in Baltimore, I mean, it's still one of the best lineups in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, spring training, whether we like to say it or not, or at least I'm of the belief of it, is right around the corner, or at least I'm going to keep telling myself that because I'm sick of football season already. I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the 2026 season. Now, 2027, what's going to happen if there's a lockout or when there's a lockout, that's another story. But for now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Is Cody Bellinger going to sign with the Blue Jays? Is Santander going to be brought back for the outfield? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, we'll respond to every single one.